Tony Plahetsky, investigative reporter for the Austin American-Statesman, and Julian Castro, former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during the Obama administration and former mayor of San Antonio, Texas. Tony, your sense as you talk to people, how folks in Texas are feeling about the federal government's preparation and response to this disaster?
Well, there are a lot of questions about what exactly transpired leading up to the flash flood and whether or not the National Weather Service was properly staffed. That is an issue that we continue to examine and try to get answers as well. And also with regard to what actually transpired that morning on the ground in Kerr County along the banks of the Guadalupe River, whether or not there was adequate notice that a flash flood watch and warning had been issued. But I can also tell you that on the ground here in Austin and really across the state of Texas, in addition to those very difficult questions about potential failures, there is also, as you can imagine, so much unimaginable grief and trauma for so many people, hundreds of people, thousands of people who are being touched by this tragedy.
Mr. Secretary, there is, as you know, a very delicate dance in relationship between the federal government and states. I can tell you firsthand, as the former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, we were devastated in the first year of our administration by a hurricane that we whipped through Maryland, devastating towns and upending infrastructure. And so there is a reliance in that relationship between the states and the feds on how they, the feds, can help the states. We have President Trump just on June 10th saying this about weaning states off of FEMA.
We want to wean off of FEMA, and we want to bring it down to the state level. A little bit like education, we're moving it back to the states so the governors can handle it. That's why they're governors. The FEMA thing has not been a very successful experiment. Very, very expensive, and it doesn't get the job done.
I can just tell you that is the most ignorant thing a president can say. It shows a very crude lack of understanding about the relationship between what FEMA provides and what the states needs. States, as you know, sir, cannot, whether it's in housing, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in education, whatever, it cannot do it all by itself. Could you just speak to what this extra added weight of lack of preparation, lack of information, lack of forewarning to communities because systems have been deconstructed by this administration, and what that means to these families as they grapple with the results of this flooding?
Yeah, Michael, I'm glad that you played that clip, because right there is a perfect example of what you get when you have a president that not only has zero experience in government, doesn't understand how it works, hadn't bothered to learn how it works, also has no respect for its role in our society, doesn't understand the relationship between the federal, state, and local governments, but also just completely unrealistic about the ability of state and local governments to be able to handle natural disasters. They absolutely need the resources that an agency like FEMA brings. And we saw in Hurricane Katrina how essential a competent, effective FEMA and HUD and SBA are. Those are the three agencies that generally respond right away. I also think it's fair to say that what we see here is a failure of leadership on all of these levels. The federal level, what the DOGE cuts have done, and layoffs have done probably on key staffing, and the ability of the San Angelo and San Antonio National Weather Service offices to do outreach to help warn people. At the state level, in this last legislative session, the legislature batted down an attempt to provide more funding for the type of early warning system that would have made a difference here. And then at the local level, we have evidence that for years, the local officials there have bypassed even engineering studies, basically paying for the ability to do things like warning gauges and warning sirens and notify people more effectively. When you have hundreds, maybe thousands of kids at these camps during the summer, you've seen a failure on all levels. And I think that the through line here is you have to have people in positions in government that actually appreciate government's role and are dedicated to doing it competently and effectively. We didn't have that here.
You know, I think what the secretary is saying is actually key to how the rest of this story is told, and frankly, prevention going forward. You know, Tony, I grew up in Nebraska in Tornado Alley, and not just at school, but at my jobs that I had when I was working there, we would do tornado drills. We would know what the sirens would sound like. We would practice where to go, and those kinds of things have absolutely saved lives. And I think about in the number of press conferences that the local officials have done since July 4th, they have rejected the notion of talking about what went wrong or what they could have done better. And, you know, to the credit to the journalists in the room, they have said the children in these camps deserve better. The families deserve better than these non-answers. What can you tell us that your sources are telling you just about what is going on within the local government down there? Because this resistance for accountability, I think, is one of the most disgusting parts of this story. You know, there are children who have yet to be recovered. There are wives without their husbands, husbands without their wives, children without brothers and sisters. Community members are missing right now. And it feels like the government doesn't want to take, the local government doesn't want to take any accountability.
What's so interesting about this from day one, from the earliest hours of this catastrophe, is that there was an effort, at least at the local level, to say this was not predicted. No one saw this coming. There's no way. And so that is an example, I think, in the minds of many people where there is an attempt very early on to not claim at least their side of responsibility. But Simone, I think another thing that people are really beginning to talk about here in Texas is the idea that one can no longer depend on the government to help protect us, take care of us. And so I think that among the survivors of this catastrophe and among people who are touched by it, and even among people who simply live in this state, there is a conversation about what they have to do as individuals to better protect themselves for what in many ways no longer seems predictable.